Hello, it's Anna Hill here with the Farming Today podcast. Today, as the new subsidy system for Welsh farmers begins, we ask why wildlife supporters walked out of discussions with the Scottish Government about its new scheme.
After more than 4 years of really constructive engagement and not seeing any real shift in what government is doing, we just really felt that we could no longer engage in this process.
We'll have more on that a little later. First, tomorrow, thousands of farmers, environmentalists and policymakers will converge on Oxford for the annual Oxford Farming Conference and Oxford Real Farming Conference. This year, the Oxford Farming Conference theme is Growing Resilience, concentrating on how farmers can create the conditions on their land and in their businesses to weather future challenges. Climate change is just one of those, and the resulting increase in flooding has made farming alongside rivers more difficult. Herefordshire mixed arable and beef organic farmer Ben Andrews knows this only too well. The River Arrow, which eventually flows into the Wye, goes through his fields and regularly bursts its banks. Ben and other farmers in the area are now planning steps to make their farms more able to deal with the changing weather. Bob Hockenhull has been to meet him.
On the outskirts of Leominster, I'm with tenant farmer Ben Andrews in his fields next to the River Arrow.
This ground's not, I think it's just been getting worse every year. I mean, like sloshing through it now. And when you think that this is actually quite low at the moment, it'll probably get up to about 5 foot of water in this field, maximum over the year. And when you've got that amount of water pushing down on the soil for up to 6 months, you get the soil just dies. It just can't sustain any life at all. And then when it dries up in spring, there's just nothing left there.
The floods mean fewer crops can be grown and there's less land to support grazing cattle. So with an eye on the future, Ben is one of 49 farmers in the county who've joined the Wyscapes Landscape Recovery Scheme, which aims to make more than 12,000 acres of farmland more resilient to climate change over the next 20 years.
We're looking to, in a lot of cases, restore floodplain meadows, having species in there that are more resilient to flooding. Wet woodland in areas where the ground tends to stay wet all year round. Species of tree that are resilient to that. Water storage, we can store some of that flood water, hold on to it, use it for irrigating our salad crops later on.
I'm with Kate Speake-Adams now from the Rural Hub Herefordshire, and you are actually overseeing this project.
Herefordshire Rural Hub is about helping farmers adapt to change, whatever those changes might be. A big part of that is how farmers access funding for environmental schemes. The Landscape Recovery Project came forward with a lot of interest in the why. We'd get told quite frequently that the future of funding is private markets and non-governmental funds, and actually being able to collaborate between these holdings, we can invite funding and investment from new locations. So whether that's to protect infrastructure or boost biodiversity, increase water storage, farms would struggle to access some of these markets on an individual basis, but when it's added up cumulatively across those 5,000 hectares, it's much easier to engage with those buyers. Being part of that landscape recovery scheme gives it a level of robustness in terms of the monitoring and the long-term benefits that they really feel is investable, which is again something which you couldn't get on your own.
As a tenant farmer, Ben says there's a limit to what he can do to diversify, and the Wyscape scheme is his only hope that he can continue viable food production.
We're still paying rent on a third of our farm that has almost become completely unproductive. This flooding isn't going to be any better, so we really need to find ways to make our farms resilient, not just in terms of what we grow, but just to allow us to stay farming for the next 20, 30 years. See me out.
Ben Andrews there speaking to Bob Hockenhull. The task of changing the subsidy system for all countries in the UK has been long-running and controversial. In a moment, we'll hear about the changes in Wales, which came into force on January the 1st. In Scotland, the new agriculture support scheme, which replaces the basic payment system, is still under construction and now under pressure. Scotland's new system retains a payment to farmers based on how much land they farm and also requires them to do more environmental work. It was supposed to be co-designed with farmers and wildlife groups working together, but environmental groups are leaving the advisory boards. RSPB Scotland, Scottish Environment Link and other groups say their views have been ignored and there's been a failure to deliver meaningful reform. Charlotte Smith spoke to Vicky Swales, Head of Land Use Policy at RSPB Scotland.
Well, we've been working for the last 4 years as part of this Agriculture Reform Board and the Policy Development Group, trying to work with government and other stakeholders, giving really constructive input around changing farming policy in Scotland, really trying to make sure that that is going to help farmers and crofters in Scotland deliver for nature and climate. We've worked constructively, we've made lots of input, attended meetings, written papers, and we just don't feel that we're making any progress and that what's coming out at the other end really reflects anything that we're saying, and indeed, more importantly, is actually going to deliver for farmers and crofters to help them tackle the climate and nature emergency.
The Minister wasn't available for an interview, but in a statement, the Scottish Government told us that the vision for agriculture has the resilience of food producers at its heart and makes clear there's no contradiction between producing food and doing so in ways that benefit nature restoration and deliver for climate outcomes. And they point out that next year, thousands more farmers and crofters will need to manage ecological focus areas, helping make sure more land is farmed in a way that protects nature and is good for the climate while still supporting sustainable production. So what's wrong with what they're doing?
So the government set out this vision and saying it's doing that, but actually what it's got in place at the moment is largely the retained old common agricultural policy schemes. And yes, they've made some minor changes. So what they've done is keep greening, for example, as part of the direct payments to farmers.
Just to explain greening, that's basically where you have this payment system, like the old common agricultural policy, where you get a payment based on how much land you farm, but you have to do certain things for the environment to get that money.
That's absolutely right. And most of the requirements at the moment just apply to those predominantly with arable land. And it requires that they have 5% ecological focus area. And the farmers have a choice of some different options within that of what they can do. What the Scottish Government has done has added a few extra options. The area of ecological focus area will increase from 5 to 7%, but not until 2027. And it will still mean of 18,000 claimants that claim those payments, only about a third of them will actually have to do anything concretely that could deliver for nature or climate. So there's a big gap between the sort of high-level vision and ambition, which we all share, I think, farmers and environmentalists, but actually the concrete schemes and payments that are being put in place that we think will help farmers do what they need to do.
Although the government will say they've provided extra money for carbon audits and soil analysis and things like that, and that this is a scheme which will ramp up as it is introduced over the years.
Well, the reality is that at the moment, there's just less than 5% of the total farm budget of £650 million annually is spent on the agri-environment climate scheme. And that's one of the things that we think can deliver for nature and climate. So yes, the government has also introduced what it's calling a whole farm plan. But these are some fairly basic things like undertaking soil testing or doing carbon audits. So the government actually isn't putting more money into measures which are directly focused on delivering for nature and climate.
How does leaving these advisory boards help with any of that?
Well, we've thought really, really long and hard about this because it's obviously really important that you have a seat at the table. But after more than 4 years of really constructive engagement and not seeing any real shift in what government is doing and not a lot of clarity about what the end points are, we just really felt that we could no longer engage in this process. But we have obviously said to government that we will continue to be as constructive as we can, and we will engage with the Scottish Government and continue to try to show how we think things could be done, but in a different way.
Vicky Swales from RSPB Scotland. In Wales, it's been 7.5 years since the Welsh Government first announced details of its new Sustainable Farming Scheme, which replaces the Basic Payment Scheme. After several consultations and many changes, the scheme finally came into force on January the 1st. So what will it mean for Welsh farmers? Marie-Claire Carey-Jones has been to meet Hugh Martineau, a farmer in Brecon, to find out.
So we run a pretty extensive system. We've got some low input sheep and we've got a number of cattle which we really use as conservation grazers. We're surrounded by quite a lot of habitat ground, so we're standing in the middle of our hay meadow and we've seen a lot of sort of species diversity coming through here. And we have everything from Iron Age Fort up there and we run down to Llangorse Lake, which is a triple SI. So we've got a lot of things going on from an environmental perspective and we really want to sort of maintain and manage that.
So what impact do you think the Sustainable Farming Scheme will have on you here?
The Sustainable Farming Scheme has given me so far a bit of confidence that we can continue to do what we've been doing and hopefully we can build on that even further. One of the key concerns we've really got is around it's only a one-year scheme so far. We don't know what the financing looks like out into the future. The old CAP schemes, basic payment and previously single farm payment, was under a multi-annual financing framework and we really need that certainty to be able to plan for the future and not necessarily just looking at a single year period of time.
But overall, you're welcoming that focus on food production alongside habitat creation and the environment and thinking about the climate when you're farming?
Yeah, for us, we want to be able to run those things side by side and make sure that we are farming and producing food without having a detrimental impact on the environment and enhancing it over time. Potentially one of the concerns I've got around the universal actions is that they sit in their own sort of policy silos in a way. And there's a risk that each of those universal actions becomes a box-ticking exercise. So soil sampling is a great initiative to have, but how do we make sure that offers value for farmers and how do we get the most out of that activity?
How are you feeling then about the year ahead?
Cautiously optimistic. Nothing's perfect and we don't expect it to be perfect, but we want to make sure Welsh Government continue to listen and evolve the scheme which meets everyone's requirements.
Well, also joining Hugh and myself here on the farm is Fraser Macaulay, who is from the Country Land and Business Association, the CLA. Fraser, what's your thoughts on the Sustainable Farming Scheme?
I think broadly we're quite positive about it. It's a real opportunity to provide farmers with the incentive to produce sustainably produced food, provide the leisure and the area for people to enjoy themselves, but also meet those challenges of climate change and biodiversity as well.
And Hugh said about the funding only being annual. Is that something that concerns you as well?
Absolutely. I mean, having that multi-annual framework is critical. We cannot have a repeat of what happened with sustainable farming incentive in England, where overnight a government scheme was pulled after years and years of development. It's absolutely crucial that trust that's shown between Welsh Government and farmers is continued and that scheme develops over time.
And we've been hearing from Hugh, who's very much in favour of those different areas of farming, so producing food, having habitats for biodiversity. What about farmers who've got more intensive systems?
There are options within the scheme to enable those kind of more intensive systems to meet the requirements. One of the universal actions is to have temporary habitats, so you can kind of develop some riparian buffer strips, unmowed headlands. So there is an opportunity for those people to meet the requirement.
Now, looking ahead, one of the big things that's on the horizon are the elections here in Wales, the Senedd elections. What impact do you think that might have on the Sustainable Farming Scheme?
If there's a change in government, there potentially might be, then it's really important we evolve the scheme and don't dissolve it. We've taken a long time to get where we are. It's really important we continue and build on the good things we've done over the past couple of years.
Fraser Macaulay there, talking to Marie-Claire Carey-Jones. That's all from us today. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Rebecca Rooney. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.